What is the greatest commandment? You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your strength. And you shall love your neighbour as yourself. Okay. So, we've talked in the previous chapter about the proposals Christian theology makes regarding how we as humans should behave. What proposals does it make in regard to loving God in prayer? And in this chapter, chapter 24, we just quickly look at a few aspects of Christian prayer as it's experienced in our world today. Just quickly at the beginning, looking at the different liturgical styles, the gatherings of Christians on Sundays, still by and large, what kind of shape do they take, and we talk about in the book the kind of heavenly liturgies, if you like, of the Orthodox tradition, the sacramental Eucharistic focus of the Roman Catholic tradition, and then the more word-based emphasis of Reformed and Protestant traditions, with also an allusion to the lively and very praise-filled traditions of Pentecostalism and other evangelical gatherings. This way in which Christians celebrate does to some extent derive from emphases found within Scripture, but it also manifests to some extent the style of prayer that's going on in those congregations. And to illustrate that in the book, just taken a few examples from what I've called paradigms of prayer. There are different ways in which Christians approach the task of being Christian. There are different ways, it seems, that Christians approach the task of pleasing God. But some are classic ways, and of these, the mission paradigm, and I've used Rick Warren, a famous evangelical American who sold millions of his book, Purpose-Driven Life, as a good example of the modern mission tradition, mission paradigm, taking seriously the charge of Jesus to go to the ends of the earth, to baptize people and proclaim the good news. His work is wonderfully balanced. Intriguingly, he talks about world-class Christians as not those who attend seminars, but those who attend seminars and work soup kitchens. Wonderful balance, very well earthed. And using the metaphor of 40, again, as a time of transformation, set aside 40 days to change your life. Very wise. From a different tradition, again, the Lutheran tradition, I've identified Dietrich Bonhoeffer as an example of the martyr paradigm. Bonhoeffer was a German pastor growing up and beginning his ministry around the time of the Nazi regime, and he's agonizing about what his role should be in the face of that nefarious political movement. And the way in which he confronted his own vulnerability and the challenge of the church to be a voice for truth in the face of such terror. He wasn't alone. The wonderful Sophie Scholl, one of his compatriots, who at 1920 and with her brother and other students in a different way standing up to such terrors, are typical of a call which many, many Christians see vividly in their own lives, experience and undergo even today in many parts of the world. This idea that the ultimate way of living the spirituality of Christianity is to be prepared to die for one's faith. This is the imitation of Christ. It's tragically still as much a reality today as it ever was under the Roman Empire. Another paradigm is what I've called the monastic paradigm, the paradigm of prayer, the idea that you sanctify the day with regular hours of prayer and oration. I've chosen for this, to exemplify this, Thomas Merton, again a bit of a rebel soul who, a bit like St. Augustine, had fathered a child before the seeds of faith were properly fathered forth in him. And in terms of his contribution, he was a lyrical and articulate explorer in prayer. very much a man of his generation, became involved in peace issues in the 50s and 60s, and after his untimely death became, in fact, if anything, more famous as someone who saw the contradiction between Christian proclamation and the tendency of Christians to justify war. He's possibly one of the reasons why there's been a gradual movement among Christian denominations towards stances related to pacifism. A last example, and it's only one example, is from the Orthodox tradition, the idea of life as a journey, life as a pilgrimage. A famous anonymous book called The Way of the Pilgrim, in an amusing set of events, encounters and journeys, this wonderful seeker of the Orthodox tradition introduces his readers to the treasures of the East, the Philokalia, the beautiful writings of the Eastern tradition, and the notion of spiritual direction, the starets, the guide, the spiritual guide, who will help us on our way. This idea of life as a journey is possibly overdone these days. Everyone I meet recently seems to want to go on the Camino, which is a pilgrimage across northern Spain. This idea of life as journey is in a sense rooted very much in Christian theology and the Christian mystical and prayer tradition. This is just scratching the surface of prayer in the Christian tradition, of course it is. And in the supplementary readings you'll find activism as prayer, using the example of Dorothy Day, and creation and sacramental imagination as prayer in the testimony and writings and life of Francis of Assisi. But these are all avenues, ways of loving God in prayer and in one's life. If what you believe is what your life is, then all of us are facing a challenge, and these mentors and guides can help us meet it.